Richards, and I'm delighted to serve as your worship associate today and to welcome you fully into this space. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies here. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit here. We welcome all you are bringing with you today and all that your heart longs to set down. We extend a special welcome to each guest among us. We invite our guests to fill out a welcome card and locate it in the pew rack in front of you and drop it in the offering plate later in the service. Guests may also pick up a welcome packet at the back of the sanctuary where you will find hearing assist devices and braille hymnals. And a fragrance-free area is located in the front right side in the first few pews. If you're a visiting family, including children or youth, after the time for all ages noted in your order of service, please join the children's recessional and head across the hall to the common room. There you'll be greeted by someone who will orient you to religious education. Immediately following the service, everyone is invited for coffee and conversation in the common room. My name is Mark Richards, and you can come talk to me at the guest table there. As a way to engage at First Church, I invite everyone to explore the announcements insert for the numerous opportunities available here. In particular, let me draw your attention to a few. The last Sunday to sign up for Journey to Membership class is coming up.
Today.
It's today. Today is the last Sunday. I should read that better next time. Explore Unitarian Universalist theology, history, and social justice, as well as membership and your own spiritual journey. The class is required to become a member of this church, but those that are curious to learn more are also welcome. Class will be held Saturday, November 16th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Thursday, November 21st from 6 p.m. to 8:30. Register at the member services table during coffee hour or online or by contacting Membership Development Coordinator Lynn Jacoby. The senior women, our naturally social Swans group, are invited to attend a potluck at St. John's on the Lake on Sunday, December 1st from 12:45 to 2 p.m. Representatives from the Franciscan Peacemakers will speak about their mission and offer their lotions, soaps, and jewelry for sale. Please RSVP by November 27th to Barbara Collingen. Voces de la Frontera is organizing a walkout in support of Dreamers and DACA this Tuesday, November 12th. March from the Voces office at 10:30 a.m. or meet for the rally at the Federal Building at noon. See our Social Justice Coordinator, Cesar Cornier, at the Social Justice table during coffee hour for more information. Please find details on these and more events in your announcements insert. Finally, please silence any electronic devices for the remainder of the service. Once again, I welcome you to First Church by inviting you to join me in the unison reading of our mission, which is printed in your order of service. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. I'd now like to invite my fellow veteran on this Veterans Day Eve, Bob Boulderson, to come up and light our chalice.
Our opening words this morning are excerpted from Noticing by Janice Ray. I would not have seen the web, a spider strung between us and the sky, except the sun had crested the cliff along the Bay of Fundy. Finally, our long night beside Mill Creek was over. I greeted the light. A shimmer is not a moon blade, not the disk of sun plating tips of red spruce silver. So much depends on where one looks, upward, and when. So much is happenstance, accident, grace. Too often the little voices that say, "See," and "there," are silent. But I did see the web. Nothing more than another life noticed, which is our job while we are here. Will you please rise in body or spirit and join us for our opening hymn, number 54, Now Light is Less.
The story I have for you today is a little more like a poem, so you have to listen very carefully, and it is by Alice Walker. There is a flower at the tip of my nose, smelling me. There is a sky at the end of my eye, seeing me. There is a road at the bottom of my foot, walking me. There is a dog at the end of my leash, holding me. There is an ocean at the top of my head, swimming me. There is a sunrise at the edge of my skin, praising me. There's water at the tip of my tongue, tasting me. There is a song deep in my body, singing me. There is a dance that lives in my bones, dancing me. There is a poem in the cradle of my soul, rocking me. There is a pen nestled in my hand, writing me. There is a story at the end of my arm, telling me. Please rise in body or in spirit for our next hymn, number 311, Let It Be a Dance. If you are participating in religious education after the first verse, please follow me out this side door.
I'd like to invite you now to join in a time of contemplation, which will be followed by silence, followed by the seated singing of Spirit of Life. So take a minute to just find yourself where you are. And I'd invite you to find your breath. Feel it moving in and out. You might want to feel your feet on the floor or your sit bones on the pew grounding you. And the top of your head connecting you to all that is. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. May our attention today be the beginning of devotion. May we turn our focus to a tree or a child or an animal friend and attend deeply and carefully. May we turn our attention to our neighbor, our community. Take a wide-angle lens on who and what matters, and learn. And may we attend to the gentle rhythm of our own hearts, pitter-pattering tenderness and compassion for self and other and world. May it be so.
My college experience was punctuated by many life lessons that challenged me and educated me in ways I did not expect. Many of those experiences happened outside of the classroom. It was my freshman year at Colorado State University, a school with over 25,000 undergraduate students, a refreshing environment after leaving a tiny high school in Kansas that had 130 boys in the high school and just 31 in my graduating class. I was ready to blend into the background and embrace my anonymity among the masses in an effort to get away from a place where everyone knows about everyone else. My geology class took place in a 400-person lecture hall, a room so big you could fit my entire school in it 3 times over. One day, the professor instructed us to get into groups of 3 with the people sitting next to us and discuss a topic. I couldn't tell you a single detail of the conversation I had in class with 2 other gentlemen, but the conversation I had later that day has stuck with me for the last 25 years. Upon returning to the dormitory, I ran into a friend who lived on my floor, and we began chatting about our classes that day. She was the only African American woman that lived on our floor, and in the course of discussing my geology class, I happened to mention the conversation I had with my 2 classmates who were Oriental. She quickly interrupted me and shared with me a phrase that has been emblazoned on my mind since. She told me, "Orientals are rugs, Asians are people." I was dumbstruck. At first I felt confused. I didn't understand the distinction she was making. I didn't say anything derogatory about them. I was merely describing the people I was talking to. And then I felt angry. She assumed my comments were malicious, possibly racist. And finally, shame settled in. Words have meaning, and I was less worldly aware than I thought I was. I didn't speak to her for a few weeks after that conversation, scared of saying something else that showed my ignorance about difference, further exposing my naivete, and feeling as though I would be judged for it. Her comment burrowed into my subconscious, and for a while, I found myself avoiding conversations about difference and trying to remain as neutral and vanilla as possible. But over time, I would hear things that didn't sound right, and I would try to muster the courage to engage them in conversation about what they said. A couple years later, while hanging out with my friends in ROTC, a joke was made about homosexuals. While I feared risking my social standing within the group, I felt it necessary to say something. And so I posed the question, would you have said that if you knew my brother was gay? Similar to my previous reaction when I was confronted by someone challenging what I said, my friend was dumbstruck. "Is your brother gay?" he asked. I repeated the question, "Would you have said it if he was?" The tension was palpable, and he tried to diffuse it by saying it was just a joke, I didn't mean anything by it. I ended the conversation by saying, "Good thing I don't have a brother, this would have been awkward." I haven't always had the courage to speak up and bring attention to those things that are hurtful, but I try to remind myself to recognize difference and put people first.
Attention is the beginning of devotion, writes Mary Oliver in her essay Upstream in her book of the same name. Oliver, one of the most quoted poets in Unitarian Universalism, is notoriously private about her personal life. In this book of essays, we learn a little bit more about her past and the forces that shaped the poet we know today. In her essay, Staying Alive, Oliver tells the story of a time that her father took her ice skating and then abandoned her there alone on the ice for hours. Eventually, another adult noticed the little girl out there on the ice by herself and took her someplace warm to try to find her parents. They called her house and found her father at home. According to Oliver, her dad had simply forgotten that she existed and gone home without her. In this home of abuse and neglect, young Mary Oliver turned her attention elsewhere, to places and to things that would keep her alive. She turned to books and to nature and made friends with trees and animals. She made childhood friendships with some of our Unitarian ancestors, Ralph Waldo Emerson and Nathaniel Hawthorne. In Staying Alive, Oliver writes, I stood willingly and gladly in the characters of everything, other people, trees, clouds. And this is what I learned, that the world's otherness is an antidote to confusion, that standing within this otherness, the beauty and the mystery of the world out in the fields or deep inside books can re-dignify the worst stung heart. It was through a wide open lens on the world and the comfort of books and trees that Oliver found solace from the pain of her childhood home. It was also where she found the deep well of beauty and mystery from which she drew up her poetry and gave it to the world. In his book, The Geography of Thought, social psychologist and University of Michigan professor Richard E. Nisbet explains a study he conducted in which he showed an underwater scene to several different groups of undergraduate students and then asked those students to describe the scene. Now, the scene included some big fish, some smaller fish, some rocks, some plants, water, etc. The American group of students from the University of Michigan, when asked to describe the scene, primarily described the big fish, as well as some of the smaller fish. The Japanese groups of students from Kyoto University, when asked to describe the scene, also described the big fish, but they made 60% more comments about the background elements in the scene. The smaller fish, the rocks, the plants, the water. Nisbet describes this difference as the difference between a wide-angle perspective and a tunnel vision perspective. There is a tension in attention. When we are paying very close attention to one thing, we might miss others. If we focus so much on that big fish, we miss the little fish and the rocks and the plants and the water. If I am paying extremely close attention to my own life, I might miss the lives of other people around me. And if I am watching solely the dominant culture with focused attention, the big fish, I might miss the wide-angle scene. Perhaps one of the reasons we love Mary Oliver so much is because she toggles between the wide-angle lens and deep, focused attention in her writing. She also goes back and forth between self and other. In one of the essays in the book, Oliver walks through the woods, paying incredibly close attention to different flowers and plants that she encounters, and then paying incredibly close attention to her reactions to those flowers and plants. She toggles between flower and mind, as Alice Walker did in our Story for All Ages today when she wrote, "There is a flower at the tip of my nose smelling me." Oliver expands out of the singular focus to the wide-angle lens, which she argues is our true home, made, quote, not of beams and nails, but of existence itself. Our true home is all of earth, with no door, no address separate from oceans or stars. There is a story about a rabbi teaching his students, and he asks them, "How do we know when night is over and the day has arrived?" One student offers, "Rabbi, we know night is over and the day has arrived when we can see a house in the distance and determine if that's our house or our neighbor's house." No, that wasn't it. Another student guessed, "Rabbi, we know that night is over and day has arrived when we can see an animal in the field and determine if it is a cow or a horse." No, that was not it. A third student said, "Night is over and day has arrived when you can see a flower in the garden and tell what color it is." "No, no, no," said the disappointed rabbi. "Why do you recognize the day as only a way to see separations and disjunctions? That is not what day is for. Night is over, and day has arrived when you can look into the face of the person beside you and tell that they are your sibling. Night is over when you can see that you belong to one another. The night has ended, and the day has arrived when you can see the face of God in the other." To what do we pay attention? I love Milwaukee. If I could choose anywhere in the country to live, it would be here. And luckily, I do live here. And last year, Milwaukee was rated as the second worst city in the country for Black people to live in. This was based on 8 key indicators: household income, poverty, high school and bachelor's degrees, incarceration, unemployment, mortality, and homeownership. In Milwaukee, there are wide disparities based on race in these areas. The study points to historically high rates of segregation as one of the main factors that contributes to gaps in socioeconomic outcomes. Unsurprisingly, in a 2018 study, Milwaukee was rated as the most segregated city in the country. Milwaukee has one of the lowest poverty rates for white people in the country, at about 8%, and one of the highest poverty rates for black people in the country at about 36%. The typical black household in Milwaukee earns about $28,000 a year compared to the typical white household, which earns about $65,000 a year. So as a white person living in Milwaukee, my automatic, unquestioned daily attention says, Milwaukee is a great place to live. When I'm paying attention to my own life in an unexamined way, I might not notice these huge racial gaps in socioeconomic outcomes. I have to deliberately and intentionally toggle between self and other, getting a more wide-angle lens into my frame. Did anyone here go to see that play at the Rep called The Niceties? Oh, some folks went and saw it. Yeah, intense show. During the play, during the intermission and before and after, they were playing a radio episode over the loudspeakers that was from 2017. It was from This American Life called We Are in the Future. And that episode was talking about Afrofuturism, and the one that they were playing was the past imperfect section of the episode. It opens by talking about the West African Sankofa bird, a bird that is walking forward but with its head turned backwards and carrying an egg, symbolizing how we carry the past with us into the future. The egg means that the past can strengthen a person if it is used properly. This sense, this theme of looking back while moving forward is common in Afrofuturism. In this past imperfect episode, writer and actor A.Z. Dungy shares some of her experiences that she had while she was working at Mount Vernon as an actor doing historical reenactments from George Washington's time. Dungy played Carolyn Branham, who was a slave on George Washington's estate. Now Dungy, who also writes for the TV series The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, is publishing a series of essays on her experience entitled How I Survived the 18th Century. On the This American Life episode, Dungy shares her experience of being the only black actor at Mount Vernon when she says, I realized pretty quickly that just being there, just existing as a black woman in that place was a threat to the fantasy of a noble America. I was the stain on George Washington's White House, and I watched them, the visitors, grapple with this right in front of me. Some people would ask Dungy questions like, why didn't you go up to Massachusetts and go to school instead of being a slave? Others would insist to her, a woman who was playing a real person named Carolyn Branham, who was a slave on George Washington's estate, that George Washington had no slaves. And of course, there were the people who needed to tell her that slavery was a good, industrious life, where you got room and board for your work. Dungy recounts how the past lived in the present for her while she worked at Mount Vernon, and how the present started to seem like the past. There were times when people at Mount Vernon tried to reenact the power dynamics from the 18th century with her in the 21st. One man, a coworker, even suggested that they reenact a slave rape scene together. Dungy started feeling pretty sick regularly, feeling like she was going to vomit and getting massive headaches. And then she remembered from her research that Carolyn Branham was sick in exactly the same way in the 18th century. My job, she said, was to inhabit Carolyn's life, but she started inhabiting mine. I had this weird sensation that I was living in multiple time periods at once, like the Sankofa bird. I started seeing Mount Vernon everywhere in the modern world. The past is always with us, no matter what. It's part of today's world. As Faulkner wrote and Obama quoted in his presidential campaign speech on becoming a more perfect union, the past is never dead. It is not even past. Here in Milwaukee, our present segregation and economic outcomes have been shaped by the past, by discriminatory housing covenants from the 1940s that kept Black people out of the suburbs. Of the 18 suburbs in Milwaukee County, 16 of them created housing covenants, many of which lasted into the 1960s and 1970s. The past is still living with us. But the Sankofa bird is not a fatalist. The Sankofa bird's message is one of wisdom. It says that we can be strengthened from the past if we are willing to learn from it, to use it well, to take that egg and shape the future. If we honor the past and recognize the way it affects the present, we can choose our future truthfully and faithfully and together. In Upstream, Mary Oliver, the child, wades away from her parents while they are standing in a river together. She walks upstream, heading to the source of the river, and in so doing, she feels her heart begin to open. Some of the steps that she took away from her parents were easy, and some of them were very difficult. But she moved along the process of opening her heart up and journeying towards the source, the process that would become the metaphor for her life and her poetry. We too can choose to move upstream, away from a painful past of abuse and neglect. We can wade towards the source of life, recognizing that we belong to one another. We can move away from a past of housing covenants and segregation and wide racial gaps and socioeconomic outcomes, but moving away from those things does not mean forgetting. Like the Sankofa bird, we must know that the past is always with us, not even past, but alive in the conditions of the world today. Knowing this will enable us to make better, more truthful, and more faithful decisions about resources and policies today. Mary Oliver wrote, "Attention is the beginning of devotion, but attention without empathy is just a report. May we first pay attention to the wide-angle lens. May we learn how to toggle between self and other, deep focus and wide focus. But may we always remember that the dawn begins when we see one another as siblings. When we see that child wandering alone across the ice, may we not only notice her, but find her someplace warm and call her parents. May we not only notice and pay attention, but may we be moved to make change. May we see the beauty of the world and be moved to protect it. May we recognize the past and how it affects the present, and thus make faithful choices to change the future. This week, my friends, my prayer for you is that you might see something new, something in the wider view that you have not noticed before, and by coupling that attention with your own empathy, may you be changed. May it be so.
Every week we have an opportunity to practice our values through sharing our resources. Our pledges are at the core of our spiritual practice of generosity. In addition, the church shares half of all the non-pledge cash in our offering plate with a community organization. In this way, we commit our resources in line with our belief that this congregation is interdependent with the world beyond these walls. Today, we share the plate with Believe in Students Fast Fund. May the practice of giving bring us joy. The offering will now gratefully be received.